Hello everyone. Today we're going to look at the sanctions, understand some facts about those who imposes them and why. Who's really affected by this measure, and why the economic sanctions today should be considered as a bad political practice, and even as an act of aggression. To start, I want to show you this title of one video from a well-known YouTube channel. The title is a question which says, "Are the economic sanctions against Russia working?" I'm not going to advertise this video or channel. If you have a desire, you probably can find it. But it's clear to me that this video is one of lots more on YouTube, which are designed as an instrument of so-called information war against Russia. This is not our subject today. Maybe someday we'll talk about such a type of videos more deeply. But today our subject is sanctions. And I'm only talking about this video because of its title. Are the economic sanctions against Russia working? What's wrong with the title? This is not the question which people should be asked. The question is, who are really targeted by these economic sanctions against Russia? Or even better to ask, who actually were affected by this measure? These are the questions. Who are the sanctions for? What is the collateral damage from the sanctions? Is there any damage? And does it matter, the related damage? And does everyone agree, in the democratic community, to be a sacrifice of such a wonderful measure? Because, are the sanctions against Russia working? They certainly do, in some way, but should also be mentioned that sanctions against Russia work not only against Russia, they definitely have the reverse effect. They reversely work against all of us. And who are affected by the sanctions. It's a lot more important in this matter. Because if you shoot at someone, and this shot destroys not the target but the people around, and even you, then what the point of this shoot is? If we go further into this talking about the effects from the sanctions, we can even use the Russian proverb, "Don't cut the branch you're sitting on." Maybe you'd like a Chinese wisdom. I know them too. Why the Western guys don't? What's the point of shooting toward yourself? I guess just one. But I can't believe that all accept such a deal. Here is one more good question. Are the sanctions doing what they were intended to? Because yes, they did some impact on the Russian economy, but not quite as the West expected. In fact, if we look at everything what has happening now, after the great measure was applied to Russia, we can see that with sanctions, Russia becomes even stronger than it was. Absolutely. And this is some contradiction, paradox. The measure, what was intended to weaken Russia, does the reverse. How's that? The West definitely didn't expect it. Sometimes I even think that it was a plan of the Russia. Maybe. Russians are sneaky, tricky guys. They know how to think ahead. And Russia becomes even stronger not only in its wealth, but also, which is very important, in the eyes of the people of the all world. I meant reasonable people, of course. Whatever someone says and shows on the news, reasonable people understand how strong Russia is, which able successfully withstand the pressure of all the West. Yes, Russia does it with friends, but that's not the point. The sanctions are thrown at Russia, and the sanctions themselves aren't weak. Still, Russia stands holding its head high. So yes, whatever the West is saying, justifying themselves, about how well they did, how their sanctions did harm to Russia, it's just a false representation. Because what they really did, was literally help Russia to become even stronger. It's the real impact of the West's actions. Okay, let's go forward to the main points of our subject. You might think that sanctions are just only a way to say that those who are imposing them disagree with someone's actions. And so, it's just some kind of protest, which also carries a function of punishment. Let's be honest, this is true, but as I said, let's be honest, it's only a part of the truth. I mean, if we look at the sanctions in general, what they designed to do, why were they even imposed? Who's imposing them, and whom are they affecting? Let's take an actual example, the North Korea, very popular country for sanctions. So why, what and who? Well, we know who, we know why. Don't make me repeat this information, it's not a top secret classified data. Okay, now let's take the Iran, and of course let's take Russia. Don't we know in these cases too, why, what and who? Yes, we do. So, when we look at the sanctions in general, what we see? What can we see? It's very clear that the sanctions are an instrument of punishment in the first place. But there's another side of sanctions which is behind the scene. So, what is there? Sanctions are not just a way to punish someone, but also a way to say who's the boss. Who makes rules and who must follow the rules. Because if you don't follow them, if you have your own vision, if you have your own way, which is different from the boss's, here you go, sanctions. So basically it's to say that you can't be different, that you can't have your way, your vision, your traditions, you must follow, you are not the one who's followed, you must follow. You should be alike. That's not to say better. Certainly you can't be stronger or better, because this is disallowed by the boss. Because of course, if you are stronger and better, then why do you even need to listen to the boss and follow his way? Basically to say, you can't be your own boss. Because the one who thinks today that he's the supreme leader, he doesn't want to lose his reign over you. And when you grow in every aspect, too much and fast, the first logical action of such a guys is to do everything to put you back, so they can continue their reign, and so all the others knew what can happen when they try to overgrow the boss. Everything to put you back includes diversions inside your country, actions aimed at generating enmity between neighboring countries and allies, special propaganda for residents designed to create dissatisfaction with the government, special propaganda for the whole world designed to create dissatisfaction with the target country, actions aimed at harming the country's economy without sanctions, of course economic sanctions too, and even military actions in some cases when there is clear resistance and if the targeted country clearly can't defend itself with its military forces. You have to understand that all I've listed now, it's just a fact confirmed by history. If you are curious, you will find the data. And I bet this list of mine is not the edge, it may contain a lot more. And in this aspect, we also need to talk about nuclear weapons. Why? Well, because it's clearly seen today what nuclear weapons have turned into. Again, let's remember the issue of North Korea. Can you guess why the US and maybe EU too still haven't started a war against the bad North Korea? I'm not trying to say here that the North Korea is good. I don't know that. I don't live there, and I don't feel their way of government on myself. I can only say that they are distinguished by the way of living and in their traditions from the rest of the world. So, can you guess why the West didn't start a war against North Korea? Can you guess why the West literally can't defeat the Russia if there will be a direct war with it? The same question about China. Can you guess why the West, especially the US, are strongly against some countries to have the nuclear weapons, like Iran or others? If you think that it's only because primarily nuclear weapons are dangerous to the world, then you should think again what in this case is hidden behind the scene. Yes, there's always something behind the scene when we talk about politicians, especially when we talk about political groups that tend to monopolize all they can, impose their one way for all the others, those who think we are the bosses of this world. And behind the scene is that nuclear weapons have become a containment system, a defensive system precisely from those potentially aggressive political groups that we're talking. That's reality. They are not aggressive, they are not? Well, not always, that's right. And precisely because some countries maintain the nuclear defensive containment systems which will be fatal for the aggressor, and the aggressor knows that very well. There are no winners in a nuclear war. And so, because of this, when the aggressor can't force another country to do something they want, and they can't intimidate another country with their military dominance, what is left? Here we go, sanctions. So the essence of the nuclear weapons issue is that on small and weak countries the West can successfully press no matter of reason. On Russia or China, and even North Korea, such pressure will have no effect. And don't get it wrong, I haven't said that because of this all countries of the world should have nuclear weapons. I've said that some countries use them to be more independent and protected from the big bossy guys. So let's get back more to the sanctions. What are each economic sanctions designed to do? Who should they harm? Who are they intended to hurt? The economy of some country? And what is economy? Is there any economy without people? Who makes money? Who makes the economy? A lot of questions, I agree, but we need all of them. They lead us to the essence of the problem, to the answers. And the answer is simple. There's no economy without people, meaning that sanctions against economy, it's simply a veiled phrase that actually means sanctions against people. You see, to find the truth you just need to find right questions, and the answers will come to you. So, does the West know that when they harm the economy, they harm people? Of course they do. And in fact this is the plan, and that's why I'm saying that it's basically an act of aggression towards people. This is done intentionally and knowingly, it's just a fact. And besides, when we were talking about big and important countries such as Russia or China, when we were talking about these countries, as was said before, sanctions against Russia working not only against Russia, because these sanctions has the reverse effect and so they are working against the whole world. It's clearly seen today. Why so? Maybe because such a big countries are important, because they are an essential part of the formed world system. Because when you pull out an important link from the machine, then the machine works bad, or don't work at all. Try that with the engine of your car and you'll see what happen. So Russians have been harmed, people from other countries have been harmed. How is this not aggression? I believe that we can even call this a crime, against all the people of the world. And if there will be sanctions against China, they will have the same effect. Who takes most of the hit? Maybe Putin, or Abramovich, or other Russian millionaire? Let's see, one guy had $10 million. After sanctions he has only 3, so he lost 70% of his money. That's a lot. But will he live badly after that with those millions he has now? Will he be hungry? Oh yeah, this is another rhetorical question. And so consequently this is why I repeat and repeat that economic sanctions, it's basically an act of aggression towards people, first at all to ordinary vulnerable people. And after that the Western leaders call themselves the good guys, even after their own vulnerable people have been harmed by their sanctions. The idea here is always to deny that you failed, and so you're always the good guy. I wonder, why won't the West ask its people what they think about the economic sanctions against Russia through some democratic referendum? Why don't they give people a choice? Aren't they the democracy itself? Come on. And do you know what is the worst thing about this situation? The harm has been done, but it isn't the end. The consequences of the wonderful measure are still in the future. Because the machine, the system is broken, and no one even thinks about repairing it. Maybe I'm wrong, and someone thinks about that, and even knows how to fix everything. Well, if so, then he'd better hurry up, because I bet he will be harmed too. Still, I'd like you to understand my strong statement why the economic sanctions are an aggression. And to reinforce this understanding, I'm gonna quote you some piece from the work of a Swiss bank. A link to the full work you can find in the description. Here is the quote. Using panel data, covering 180 countries over 6 decades, this paper shows that recessions are systematically associated with higher mortality rates. During years, when GDP falls, death rates rise, primarily in emerging market and developing economies, and they're among children in particular. In advanced economies death rates increase only slightly. We further find that the scarring effects of recessions persist for several years, and that deeper recessions lead to larger increases in mortality. That's all. What this information says to you. So when economy goes down, GDP too, which in turn leads to the increase of the mortality rates, and as was stated, among children in particular. And I'm reminding you that the research covering 180 countries over 6 decades. Does the Western bossy guys know that? You can be sure they do. Still they're continuing. How do you think? Are you in the list of the impact of the GDP fall? Or maybe your kids are? Still don't think that economic sanctions is an aggression? If so, well, then you probably the guy who made them. I feel myself harmed. Too much or not? Does it matter? Who's going to compensate me for indirect damage? Maybe I should sue the West in the International Court of Justice for this. The same international court which is under the West, and thus it will compensate me a damn thing. How should I call them after that? Is bastards good enough? Or should I use more strong word? It seems like some guys are losing their mind just because of the challenge with someone. You know, some guy just at the beginning of the war told me that there is so much hypocrisy in politics. And well, the way he said that, it was obvious that he was talking about Russia. He said, "Oh my gosh, there's so much hypocrisy in politics, we've almost recovered from the COVID, and now this, Putin is very bad." He actually said that. And well, I can't disagree with him about hypocrisy, but if we look at some facts, and I believe it should be clear by now for everyone, that sanctions are a hit first at all, to simple citizens. If we take a look at all sides of this story, who are hitting, who have been hit, who are claiming that they are the best, well, then it's obvious that there is a lot of hypocrisy in politics, but no need to glue this word to Russia. It's the West, those who claim they are the good guys, and of course they're saviors. But at the same time when they say so, they hit people with their sanctions very badly. In fact, they hit not just Russian people, but their own too, as well as people in other countries, if we look at the back effect of their sanctions. Unlike the West, Russia has never put itself as a savior of the world or a good guy. Find Putin's speeches and you'll see. However, Putin is not saint, of course. But the thing is that he doesn't pretend to be. When someone asks him about bad things, abstractly he just always says, "Look at yourself." And his point is quite good, because some countries have had huge problems for decades, but still they like to put their nose somewhere else. So yes, they are all absolutely hypocritical, all politicians. Okay, let's finish here with my refusal that I'm some guy who has something to do with the Russian government, or that I'm some guy who's saying that Russia is good, because I'm not. I believe that Russia is what it is. And that Russia, unlike others, doesn't pretend to be some idyllic country and the best place to live. And actually I think this is one of the big pluses for Russia. And I believe that Western leaders are no better than Putin at all. And I believe that most of what Western leaders are doing for Ukraine today has nothing to do with the actual help to average Ukrainian citizens. Here must be asked a question. How much money out of the billions that the West has already provided to Ukraine has been used for the actual help to average citizens of Ukraine? Oh yeah, I know what you want to say, something like, a tank is a common help for all Ukrainians. Okay, whatever you say. And okay, this whole epilogue of mine can be a subject for another video, if you want to, so just like, subscribe, share a link to this video, and I will know that you care. See ya.